Before Mad Max Fury Road had been released in 2015, there was actually a 30-year gap between that and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome in 1985. Fury Road had a successful run at the box office, making $380 million worldwide, as well as receiving plenty of critical acclaim and even scooping up a couple of awards at the Oscars. And after Fury Road was released, there was talk of a sequel to that movie, Mad Max The Wasteland. And at the time it seemed that everyone was on board to return, with George Miller set to direct and Tom Hardy to reprise the role. Tom Hardy had only played the role once, as the role had been played in the previous 3 movies by Mel Gibson. And when Fury Road was initially getting off the ground back in the year 2000, Mel Gibson looked at returning to the role. However, after so much time, George Miller sought out a different actor to play the role of Max. Why the film didn't get picked up immediately after the success of Fury Road is not actually a mystery. There was some legal disputes between George Miller and Warner Brothers. Miller stated that Warner Brothers was holding out around $7 million worth of bonuses, to which both parties eventually settled out of court. But it was the character Furiosa, as played by Charlize Theron in Mad Max Fury Road, that received a lot of acclaim and praise in that movie. And because of that, George Miller wanted to explore that character in a spin-off movie rather than going ahead with Mad Max The Wasteland immediately. It appears that George Miller had been trying to make Furiosa for quite some time, as early as 2017 when these disputes kind of came to an end, and it wasn't until COVID-19 hit that he was able to redevelop the movie and then start shooting over the last few years. It took Miller another 9 years before the film would get finished and released, and after the completion of the movie, the director had spoken about his next project being Mad Max The Wasteland. Miller has said he has developed the story a lot more and he was ready to go after this film had been completed. However, after the lackluster box office for Furiosa, it appears that Mad Max The Wasteland may never see the light of day. Big budget movies from studios like Warner Brothers have so much money put into them, not just in production but also marketing the project. The production budget of Furiosa and Mad Max Saga sat around $168 million, and at time of recording the film has only managed to gross $168,800,000, meaning if we just looked at this on its face value, the film has only grossed $800,000. And for a big Hollywood studio like Warner Brothers, this is not a good sign. And this doesn't even take into account the marketing budget for the movie. The general rule of a Hollywood film is doubling its production budget and adding that on for marketing, and then anything after that is going to be the film's profit. So if we take that into account, this film has made a $168 million loss, which is appalling. And because of this, the Mad Max IP is probably going to be dead in the water. And you can discuss why Furiosa and Mad Max Saga didn't do too well at the box office. It obviously had an audience, because to make $100 million at the global box office is still quite an achievement. It's just when you have such a high budget film that you're not seeing a return on investment. And even if for some reason Warner Brothers do decide to greenlight this Mad Max The Wasteland project, maybe they'll have more confidence in Tom Hardy returning to star, although the fact that Anna Taylor-Joy seems to be one of the biggest upcoming bankable Hollywood stars of this time, and the film wasn't even able to break even in a sense, means maybe the IP is dead and people aren't interested in this world anymore. If Warner Brothers were to greenlight another project by George Miller in the Mad Max universe, they'd have to possibly rethink The Wasteland and make it a much smaller budget production. I certainly feel there is a lower budget version of Mad Max that we could see still. The earlier films with Mel Gibson had much smaller budgets even compared to the rate of inflation, and maybe if you went back to basics and did a $30 to $50 million version of The Wasteland, that could eventually get greenlit and hopefully reinvigorate the series. The fact that there was so much time in between Fury Road and Furiosa probably harmed the project. Had Furiosa come out a couple of years after 2015, or even Mad Max The Wasteland, maybe that would have kept momentum in the projects and the IP and the world of Mad Max, but 9 years in between movies has probably done a great deal of harm to the brand. George Miller had initially planned to release Furiosa as an animated movie in the style of Japanese anime, although he was very keen to do what he did with Fury Road and make it live action, and it just seems that that has caused a lot of trouble. But I do feel had the film come out a few years after rather than 9 years, it probably would have had a better return on investment. So in a way, Warner Brothers are to blame for holding out the money and leading the dispute between Miller and Warner Brothers, and that eventually settled, so they could have just done it originally and probably fast-tracked the project, and the box office return would have been as high, or if not higher, as Fury Road. On a side note, I feel that's why the Indiana Jones movie that came out last year, The Dial of Destiny, failed at the box office. Obviously, it had an enormous budget, and because of COVID regulations, it required that. But the fact that we went over 15 years for another Indiana Jones movie, where we saw Disney acquired the rights to Lucasfilm back in 2012. It had only been 4 years since the last Indiana Jones movie, and then it took another 11 from the acquisition before we got this final installment of the Indiana Jones franchise. And the fact that Disney did pump out a lot of Star Wars content, and it did make a lot of money, but the brand has sort of been harmed in a way, but that's a story for another time. But the fact that they didn't do enough with the Indiana Jones IP in that time period probably harmed the brand. And I think that's the similar case here with the Mad Max world. And Tom Hardy has recently been promoting some films he's working on, one of them being The Bike Riders, and he was asked about the upcoming movie Mad Max The Wasteland, as during promotion for Furiosa, George Miller had talked about the project going ahead after this one. But Tom Hardy simply said, "I don't think that's going to happen." And this is probably because it's been a long time since that film was being talked about. There seemed to be discussions just as Fury Road came out that Tom Hardy was keen to return. And there is stories that George Miller and Tom Hardy didn't get along on set, but they kind of buried the hatchet after the film had been released and were keen to work together again. However, after such a long period of time, maybe Tom Hardy has lost interest in playing the role of Max, and if they are going to go ahead with the movie, they'll end up casting someone new in the role. And that's not going to be a big deal in a way. I am disappointed if they don't keep Tom Hardy in the role, but I feel a lot of people were concerned that we're getting a Mad Max movie without Mel Gibson, and I feel like it turned out just fine, and Fury Road is one of my favourite films of all time, and it really stands out as a special movie to me. Had I grown up with the Mad Max films with Mel Gibson, I may have felt differently, but I felt that Fury Road just stood out as a great piece of cinema to me. And it didn't bother me at all knowing that Mel Gibson had played the role previously, that a new actor was taking on the part. George Miller even spoke about having a different actor play Max for a long time after Mel Gibson kind of backed away from Hollywood life after some personal issues, and even the fact that he was getting older in 2000 when they were going to make the movie. George Miller had wanted to work with Heath Ledger and cast him as Max. Other names that were thrown around included Eminem and Jeremy Renner. And at this time, I don't really know what Tom Hardy's salary expectations are for a film like this, especially if it's going to be a smaller budget movie, if it does go ahead at all, although he seems to be doubtful it's going to happen. But if it does happen, it may happen with a younger actor or an actor who has a much lower salary demand compared to Tom Hardy. There's also the chance that we could get an animated movie, as that would bring costs down significantly, and George Miller had already spoken about making Furiosa an animated movie rather than doing it live action. And maybe if they can get the animated film of Mad Max off the ground and get some life back into it after this box office flop, maybe we could see a live action Mad Max movie once again. I'm certainly not holding my breath for this movie to happen. I feel like Mad Max The Wasteland will be cancelled and it's never going to see the light of day, and we're not going to see Tom Hardy return to the role. Even if they went into production next year, 10 years between playing a character is a long time, and I feel Tom Hardy has grown as an actor and is moving away to different sort of projects, and it's not something he seems that keen to return to. As his comments were, he doesn't think it's happening. He wasn't elaborating on that at all. He seemed very blunt about it. He didn't want to say, oh, I'm excited about that, I really hope it goes ahead. He was just like, I don't think it's happening. So I think it's lost steam, or he's lost steam. So this film is dead in the water, unfortunately. Though I'd like to hear your thoughts on the idea of Mad Max The Wasteland actually going ahead, and do you feel they could do a smaller budget version of Mad Max, do an animated film, or do you think this movie is just dead in the water like I do? Let me know in the comments below, give this video a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and make sure to click the bell icon to receive notifications for all of my videos. That's it for now, thanks for tuning in.